So we are on the fourth video, 7.2, D is in Delta, and we are ready for example 4, which is dependent systems. And I'm going to go ahead and pause this while I write the equation out, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so there's example 4. We have a system here, and they're asking to solve it, and we're just going to do this in the augmented, well, this is an augmented example here, and we're going to do it in the echelon method. Okay, so all I did here was rewrote the system in the augmented matrix form to get that. And one of the things that you'll notice here is that we do not have a 1 here at all that we can trade places with. So when that's the case, I usually take the smallest number, or the smallest x, and it happens to be the 5 here, the one on top, and I multiply the entire thing by 1 over that number. And this will change that to 1. 1/5 times 5 is 1. So then I get 1 to 12 over 5, which isn't real pretty. In fact, let's write it as a decimal. 2.4, and then 6140 times, or divided by 5 is 1228. Okay, now that becomes locked. Okay, whoops, wrong thing. I need to highlight that because that has our 1 there for our x. And so we definitely will use that row in order to get our other rows, but at this point we're not going to do anything else with that, so we'll lock that in place so we know that that is a finished product there. Alright, so the next thing we need to do is get rid of this. We need to make that a 0. So if I make this top row a -10, add it to this +10, that will be a 0. So I'm going to multiply this whole top row by -10. Okay, so let's assume that we multiplied the top row by -10 and added it to this. So our new second row, once we add this row with the -10 to the second row, this is what we're going to have. We're going to have a 0, a -2, a 6, a 1, 1, 2, 0. Okay, and our bottom row will stay the same since we haven't done anything to it yet. Okay, so we're getting there, but we need to make this a +1. Okay, so what we'll do, we need to make that a +1 is we'll multiply this whole thing by a -1/2. So a -1/2 times a -2 will make this a 1. Okay, so let's erase some of this stuff here. Okay, so we're going to multiply this whole thing by -1/2. Okay, so once we do that, we will have, again, our 1, 2, 2.4, 1, 2, 2, 8, which again is locked. And then we take our 1/2 times 0, and this becomes a 1, this becomes a -3, and this becomes a -560. Okay, so since we are good to go there, we're going to lock that one, which leaves us with 300, 480, 1080, and 435, 600. Now I'm not putting my correct symbolage on here. I probably should keep doing that. Okay, so there's where we're at now. So now what I need to do, I need to change this to a 0, and I need to change this to a 0, and I need to change that to a 1. So that's ideally what I'm looking at doing next. So in order to do that, I'm going to multiply my top here by -300. And what that'll do is that'll give me a negative 300 plus 300, which will give me a 0. So that'll give me negative 600. So you're going to distribute that all the way across, and then you're going to add the new row that you multiply by negative 300 to this row. And you're going to get, for that bottom row now, instead of 300, you're going to have 0. You're going to have negative 120. You're going to have 360. And your line, and 67,200. All right, and we already have our 0, 1, negative 3, negative 560, and our 1, 2, 2.4, 1, 2, 2, 8. Okay, so at this point, again, I'm going to show these are locked. This bottom one is not locked yet because that has to be 0, and that needs to turn to a 1. So let's keep moving. Now I notice here that this is a 1 here, and if I want to change this to a 0, I'm going to have to change this 1 to 120. So 120 plus negative 120 will give me 0. So I'm going to multiply this entire thing times 120. Okay, so 120 times 0 will give me 0, so it's nice, it won't change that. This will give me 120, so that when I add this, I get 0. This will give me negative 360, and then I add that. And this will give me whatever 560 times 120 is, a big old herkin number there. Okay? Alright, so let's go ahead and do that, and then we're going to add to that. Alright, so let's move this up, and I don't want to just tell you to do it, I want to show you what happens here because an odd and strange thing goes on. Alright, so our 1, 2, 2.4, 1, 2, 2, 8, that stays the same. Our bottom stays. And then this becomes negative 67,200. Okay. And our bottom is this. $67. Okay, now I add these two, and I get a new third row. And my new third row is 0. 0, 0, 0. And my second row is back to 0, 1, negative 3. Sorry, my dog wants out. Andy, stop. I know. And my top row is here. Alright, so my locked row is this one and this one. And my problem row is this one here because I have zeros all the way across, which means that my z has an infinite number of solutions, which is just fine, but it can cause a little bit of grief. Okay, that being the case, I want to set this up so that my x equals an equation with z in it, since z can be anything, and I want my y row to be set up as an equation with z in it. For example, this let's look at the second row, because I'm not quite done yet. My second row would be 1y minus 3z equals negative 560. So from that right there. So y will equal 3z minus 560. So see what happens there? I set that up so that I had no x's. Well, obviously I don't because that's a 0. I have my y, and I can set it up equal to 3z minus 560 because z can be any number. Okay, so I set it up that way. No x's. Problem is up here in this first row, I have x plus 2y plus 2.4z equals 1228. I have an X, a Y, and a Z. I don't want that Y. Okay, I want it set up so that everything is X or Y equals just something with a Z. Okay, so I don't want that Y. So I got to go back and look at my matrix again, and I need to make this I need to make this a 0 so that my X is 1, my Y goes away, I have a Z, and I have it equal to 1228. So I'm going to go ahead and take the second row, because there's a 1 here, and multiply it by -2. So I get 1, 2, 2.4, 12, 28, and then I get 0, -2, 6, and what is that? 11, 20. Okay, so now I'm going to add these two together here to get a new first row. Okay, and that way things will work out better for me. So my new first row will be, let's put it down here, 1, 0, 8.4, and 2, 3, 2, or 2, 3, 4, 8. Okay, so my second row is this, and my top row is going to be X plus 8.4Z equals 2348. Alright, so let's get rid of all this clutter here. Alright, so now I have X equals, I'm going to move this over. Okay, so there's my two equations. So this one is from my top row, this one's from my middle row. So now I have Y equals a 3Z, and X equals -8.42Z. Okay, so I don't have multiple variables here. Okay, so I have two equations with two variables. So just something to remember when you're doing this, if you get your Z's that zero out, make sure that you can set Y equal to the Z and X equal to the Z, and there's no other variables except the Z over here on the right hand side. Alright, so we're going to go into example 5 and then example 6 and then be done. So I'm going to make another video. These videos do take a long time, and it's just they make the lesson so stinking long, and I just want to make sure you understand what's going on, so I spend quite a bit of time doing this. So anyway, we'll do one more video and be done with this lesson.